For Americans today, the car is an integral part of our daily lives. For some, it is just a means to get from point A to point B. For others, it is a way of life.
DJ Jones.
Oh yeah. Yeah. All these horses in my car got me going fast. I just wanna do the dash, put my pedal to the gas. Going so fast, hope I don't crash. One false move, that could be my last. All these horses in my car got me going fast. I just wanna do the dash, put my pedal to the gas. Going so fast, hope I don't crash. One false move, that could be my last. I just pulled up in the Benz, it was just me and my mans. Fishbowl, no turn, scooping your hoe on her friends. Won't take that bitch to the moon.
But now let's look at how this all began.
In 1885, Carlos Benz built the first prototype car, the motor wagon. He was awarded a patent for this car the following year. This car was essentially a tricycle that was powered by an internal combustion engine that he designed in 1878.
Introducing the 1886 Motor Wagon Sport. You can now travel at 2/3 the speed of a horse.
Picture me ballin', picture me with the fifth of Henny, something foreign. Picture me riding around here with a Benzo. Picture me blunting with the tints on the window. You could see by the looks of it, I got the feeling. I told them bitches I'm something they should believe in. I told my mama.
The internal combustion engine itself was a great feat of engineering perfected by Gottlieb Daimler, whose company eventually merged with Benz's company following both of their deaths.
The car was first brought to America in 1893 when the Duryea brothers built and tested the first gasoline-powered car this side of the pond. It was called the Duryea Motor Wagon. Large-scale production of the car finally began in 1901 by Ransom Olds. His company, Oldsmobile, made use of production line manufacturing, which was first used by Thomas Blanchard in the production of guns at Springfield Armory. The Oldsmobile factory was a stationary assembly line, which made use of interchangeable parts. The result of this was the Oldsmobile Curved Dash, which was the first car that was accessible to middle-class Americans at the costly price of $650, which is equivalent of about $15,000 today.
While the stationary assembly line was very efficient, Henry Ford made use of the moving assembly line, which was 8 times more efficient, requiring only an hour and a half of manpower per car. The moving assembly line allowed for the true mass production of cars. This Fordism is the reason car production became a legitimate industry in America, allowing for the Ford Motor Company to become the leading automobile manufacturer in America. In 1908, Ford introduced the Model T. The Model T came to represent more than just a car. It was a symbol of the rising mass consumerism in America. The car was no longer an exclusive item owned by elites, but rather a reality for most Americans. The Model T also introduced the idea that a car could be a practical form of transportation. It only had 20 horsepower and could reach speeds of 40 to 45 miles per hour.
By the 1920s, 3 main auto manufacturers had been established in the US: Ford, GM, and Chrysler. All 3 were based in Detroit, making the city a major urban center of manufacturing. During this time, innovation in cars had slowed down, but production was still high. Manufacturers changed models annually to boost sales, a technique that companies still use today.
The auto industry changed the landscape of American urban centers. Cars created a need for good roads, opening up more jobs and infrastructure. The Federal Aid Road Act of 1916 and the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1921 funded road construction. Cars also created the fuel industry, a major use for oil, and a need for service stations to provide gasoline, washes, and maintenance. The steel and tourism industries got major boosts from automobiles, and drive-in restaurants and theaters began to sprout up.
The Prohibition movement of the Progressive Era resulted in the 18th Amendment, put into effect in 1920. This caused a huge market for illegal alcohol called moonshine. These moonshine runners upgraded their stock cars in order to evade the authorities. Eventually, these fugitives got together to compare their cars, which ended up in races, thus starting the American tradition of auto racing. Eventually, this became NASCAR, an icon of American racing. The Great Depression ultimately led to the demise of most auto companies besides the Big Three and a few small independent companies. However, post-war prosperity led to increased production by these manufacturers, and by 1950 the US produced about 3/4 of the world's cars. During the World Wars, the world witnessed Germany and Japan become truly industrialized nations, with their own factories and production lines. The US started importing German cars in 1949. The competition between domestics and imports gave Americans more options and drove a greater innovation in cars. Inspired by the German Autobahn during World War II, President Eisenhower passed the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956. This act approved the construction of the Interstate Highway and was known as the largest public works project at the time.
The new roads created by the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 tended to be straight without many curves. Because of this, many Americans moved to cars with good straight line speed without caring much about handling. The American industry responded to this with cars with large V8 engines called muscle cars. These cars had little care for things like emissions or the environment, as this was the era before high gas prices and environmental change. These muscle cars were relatively simple and did not include much technological innovation, instead relying on large displacement engines to produce power. This was in contrast to European cars, which tended to be smaller and more maneuverable because of the lack of space in Europe compared to the US. Muscle cars created a new culture in America, of which cars were the center rather than simply a utility.
Many young drivers participated in both legal competition and illegal street racing, demonstrating the pride they had in their cars. Despite the lack of dramatic technological innovation, muscle cars stimulated some changes, such as fastback designs, shaker intakes, and hemispherical heads. Landmark muscle cars included the 1964 Dodge Hemi, 1964 Pontiac GTO, 1968 Mustang Cobra Jet, and 1969 Camaro ZL1.
The Japanese automotive industry was relatively new, allowing them to produce enticing cars for the US market. Their cars were more advanced, with more of an emphasis on practicality for everyday life. Japan made technologies like turbochargers more mainstream and more reliable.
Japanese cars made use of smaller engines more than large displacement American V8s, making them more fuel efficient. The emphasis on practicality and fuel efficiency made Japanese makes such as Nissan, Honda, and Toyota popular in the US during the 1970s due to the 1973 oil crisis. In 1980, Japan started to lead the nation in auto production. As a result, the United States imposed a voluntary restraint agreement on Japanese automakers, which limited the amount of cars Japanese manufacturers could import to America. To combat this, Japanese car companies opened new factories in the United States. In order to help ease the competition, the Big Three invested in Japanese automakers.
I'm in a foreign, she got on foreign, she gon' top me to the morning. They might be feeling important.
German cars also captured the interest of American drivers. German engineering proved to be superior to other vehicles with their excellent performance and reliability. They focused on handling and good track performance rather than the pure straight line speed. German cars were seen as a sign of a person's success. Many businessmen of the time chose German vehicles due to their luxurious interiors and comfortable rides. Manufacturers like BMW and Porsche became popular both for performance and prestige, and their success continues to this day. In 2009, German automakers made up 90% of the premium car segment of the world's market.
The beginning of the 1990s was characterized by a recession and rising oil prices due to the invasion of Kuwait. This caused people to care more about practicality in vehicles, and the light truck automotive segment rose in popularity. These light trucks bypassed corporate average fuel economy standards, allowing companies to avoid fines for having non-fuel efficient vehicles. American car companies continued to invest in competitors while European manufacturers began the production of some cars in America. Both European and Japanese companies opened more and more production plants in the US.
The 2000s presented a dichotomy of car culture. On one hand, there was a focus on making cars as fuel efficient as possible. The Toyota Prius, introduced in 1997, was the first production hybrid car. This ushered a new type of car into the market, with companies like Honda quickly following with their own hybrids. Hybrids are much better for the environment, as they utilize both gasoline and electric power. On the other hand, there was
The need for speed.
performance cars became more mainstream during this era due to films like The Fast and the Furious and video games like
The need for speed.
These media forms promoted street racing culture, allowing drivers to follow their passion. These films also helped popularize the Japanese tuner as being a sought-after car and depicted mechanics modifying their cars for increased performance, which created a new interest in modifying cars. This led to the growth of the aftermarket industry, selling performance parts for enthusiasts who wanted more out of their cars. Many American drivers gained a new interest in Japanese cars, such as the Honda Civic Si, due to their low costs and ability to be modified.
In the 2010s, a gas price spike caused a panic in the car industry. The industry once again responded with increased research into fuel-efficient vehicles with a new focus on electric vehicles. At their introduction, electric vehicles were expensive and impractical, offering little range and luxury. However, companies like Tesla and Chevy improved EV technology and have been able to incorporate these cars into the mainstream market. As of 2017, Tesla, an electric car manufacturer, has sold 257,000 vehicles. They've captured the interest of Americans, and now Tesla carries a prestigious reputation, and many strive to buy them, not only as a car but also as a status symbol. This reflects the growing attitude in the country that cars are not only vehicles but also signs of a family's success.
In the early 2010s, interest in performance cars dropped to the recession of 2007 to 2008, but a recovering economy allowed interest in performance cars to grow, creating competition within the market. As of now, most manufacturers sell multiple performance cars.
Throughout history, the car has represented many things. It is a symbol for American consumerism, American innovation, and American freedom.
Today, we are on the verge of incredible new technologies. Electric, hydrogen-powered, and self-driving cars are all systems that are being looked into.
And at the same time, the aftermarket industry is running stronger than ever, with more and more enthusiasts customizing their cars.
The automobile was, is, and will continue to be central to American culture.